Hey, good morning, everybody. So, hope you guys are doing well this morning. As I told you guys, I'm going to be doing devotions daily this week based on Holy Week. And so, if you didn't catch that in the message yesterday, I encourage you to go back and check it out. Today, I'm going to look at Matthew 22:34 through 40. It's a well known passage that I pray encourages you and challenges you. It says, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two things. And so what's interesting is the Sadducees and Pharisees did not like Jesus. They often were trying to trip him up. They were trying to catch him off guard. They were trying to pull him into debate. Either way, they didn't like him. He was a threat to their religiosity and their power. The irony is the Sadducees and the Pharisees didn't even like each other. But yet they hated Jesus so much, they found reasons to get together and collude against him and try to trip him up. And so they came to him with this question that we just read. He goes, what do you consider the greatest commandment to be? And so Jesus responds with what is known as, in Jewish culture, or at the time, was the Shema. And that is what was repeated twice daily by anybody who is Jewish, the Jewish people. And that was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. And then he goes on to quote Leviticus 19:18, which says to love your neighbor as yourself. And so Jesus places emphasis on this idea of simply, and we've heard this over and over, but yet it remains to be true, to love God and love your neighbor. And this idea of loving God is with everything, with the whole person. And so my love for God isn't limited to my Sunday services. We've learned how many people really put a lot of value in the church building, as if somehow that was where they could define their love of God and understanding of God. And we know that not to be true. And so my love for God is expressed in everything I do. And with my whole person, I love God. And so Jesus is emphasizing what they already knew and what they believed, is that you love the Lord your God with everything. And then he ties it to this passage and he goes, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. And so you think about this idea of my call to love God is tied to everything. So how I love my neighbor is also a reflection of how I love God. And so this idea, though, it isn't abstract. This isn't like some floaty idea of love. It's getting down to the core of who you are. Is the nature of who you are, is the person that you're letting God transform you into being, taking on this full scope of loving God and loving other people. You know, there's no qualifications to who your neighbor is. And we see that when we look at the story of the Good Samaritan. The good guy in the story is Samaritan, and the Samaritan would have been the person that the typical person hearing the story would not have liked at all. But yet Jesus makes him the good guy and demonstrates that your neighbor is anybody who is in need, or perhaps even anybody that God would bring along your path. And to love God and to love your neighbor is to understand what God is calling us to do. To love God wholeheartedly and to love our neighbor sincerely fulfills all the law and the prophets, Jesus said. He literally took all of the Torah, all the writings, everything, and he summed it up and said, these two statements that we hold to sum everything up. To love God with everything within you and to love your neighbor. You know, and we're reminded of the golden rule. What, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And it's this idea, again, that treat others as you'd want to be treated. But I think there's even this deeper call of like truly treat people as God would call you to treat them. You know, and it takes us to Paul's words that we know so well, and it's this: when we understand love. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, it always trusts, it always perseveres. Love never fails. And he goes on to say that many things will someday cease, many things We understand things in part, but then he goes, these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And so in this season that we're in, how do my actions demonstrate wholeheartedly my belief, my trust, and my faith in God? And how do my actions wholeheartedly demonstrate that I love my neighbor? So I don't get angry when I disagree with somebody. I don't look to get into debate. I don't. I look to serve my neighbor. I look to love one another. And so our actions as believers reflect the heart of God that is transforming us into his likeness. And so, you guys, I challenge you with that this week. I've been praying for you. And I just pray you guys have a great week as we lead into Easter. Again, consider the words that Jesus wrote in the last 8 chapters of Matthew, or what he said, and of course what Matthew wrote in the last 8 chapters, and let it encourage you, let it challenge you, and let's remember what it is that Jesus did for you and for me, and let's love others as God calls us to. Have a great week.